Kelly Davis, your host of the Untold Miracles podcast, and today I am so excited. We have a very special guest on the show. She's an acclaimed violinist, dancer, performance artist, composer, motivational speaker, author, and a 2-time Billboard Music Award winner. Her YouTube channel has over 10 million subscribers, and her videos have over 2 billion views. But most importantly, she is an amazing human being with a big heart for giving back. Please welcome to the podcast, Lindsey Stirling.
Hello. Wow, that's quite the intro. Thank you so much, Kelly.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here, especially since you are so busy. You're on tour right now, and I really want to thank you so much for making the time to be here.
Absolutely, yes, and thanks for taking the time to have me. This is awesome.
Well, I had the opportunity to meet you at an event for Children's Miracle Network Hospitals last March at Disney World, where you were a part of a big surprise for one of our miracle kids, Nate Farrell, who loves you and loves playing the violin. Can you tell our listeners about that surprise and what impact meeting Nate has had on your life?
Oh, wow. You know, those kind of experiences are, one of the reasons I love what I get to do, like to be able to travel somewhere to surprise someone, and that I will always remember that experience. I was so inspired by Nathan. He is so full of energy and passion and life, and it just was such an eye-opening experience for me to be reminded how someone's internal spirit and their motivation in life is so much in control of how they feel about themselves. Here's a kid that has had a lot taken from him and his family, and he knows that his life can't be maybe what he once thought it could be. And yet he is so positive, and he looks at life like every day he's going to make it the best he can. And to see someone so young with such a mature and incredible outlook, and to watch him change people's lives that he meets in that way. I've been following him ever since. And, watching his social media, I now am a fan of what he does, and it really is inspiring. Every time I see his posts come up, I'm uplifted, and I'm reminded of what is important in life. And I just felt like I learned so much from that experience, and he really inspired me. And, not me just saying that was a life-changing experience. It really was life-changing. And anytime I do things with children's hospitals, I'm just blown away by the resilience of these children and the fact that there literally have to be angels surrounding them because they are so full of light.
I agree. And for the listeners, Nate is 9 years old. He has mitochondrial disease, and he was on stage playing the violin, and Lindsey came and surprised him, and they started playing the violin together, and it was the most magical moment. Nate has a disease called mitochondrial disease. There is no known cure, but he doesn't let it stop him from making his dreams come true. And Lindsey, you made his dream come true that day, and I will forever be grateful for you for hopping on an airplane from LA to surprise this kid and perform for our audience. It truly is what miracles are all about for me. So thank you for being a part of that miracle.
Oh, absolutely. It was amazing.
Well, on this podcast, we talk about miracles. And I know when you were younger, your family didn't have enough money for you to take violin and dance lessons. And so you had to pick one. Were there any miracles involved with you choosing the violin?
Well, my parents, I think, have always provided a home where creativity was, encouraged, and art was encouraged. And, from a very young age, my parents were surrounding us with music and with orchestra music, and taking us to little orchestra concerts. And I think the real miracle in me finding the violin was the fact that I had parents that fostered that environment, that made it possible for me. And also just the fact that they sacrificed so much for me to be able to play the violin. And, they searched for a teacher that was willing to give me 15-minute lessons because that's all they could afford. And they found this young college student that was willing to do it when no other teacher would. And I think life is filled with so many miracles that, get us from point A to point Z. We might not even recognize as miracles on a regular basis. And that's, I feel like, a lesson I've learned in the last probably year. One of the bigger lessons I've learned is that I think sometimes we're so unaware that we're experiencing miracles, and we just kind of pass them off as life events, or that happened, or this happened. But only looking back, sometimes you get this little gift where you're made aware that, oh my gosh, that actually was meant to be, and there's no way that was a coincidence, you know. But unless like this event had happened that made me aware of it, I would have just passed off this really cool little miracle in my life as being a random thought that popped into my head. And I think just sometimes we are so unaware of how much we're guided and how many miracles happen every day.
Back in 2010, you made it to the quarterfinals on AGT, and Sharon Osbourne said, "I don't think what you're doing right now is enough to fill a theater in Vegas. Right now, you're on a very big tour." And what did you learn about yourself from being on the show and from not winning?
I think that was a very important part of my journey being on that show, because it really did teach me, you know, that I did not want to, well, you know, I wanted to be able to be in control of how I'm represented. And I didn't want to, you know, be this artist where people told me what to wear and what to say and how to play. And, you know, because in those kind of systems, that's how it goes. You're kind of told what you can and can't do and how you need to do it. Of course, they have an agenda of a show that they're trying to put out there to the world, and being kind of thrown into that system made me realize, like, this doesn't work for me, and I don't want to be in that system. And so it kind of, you know, it was a huge opportunity for me to learn what not to do. And also it kind of gave me a little kick in the pants because, you know, to be honest, looking back at it, I didn't do very well. I don't look back at it and think, wow, they were so wrong. Like, I should have won, because heck no, I really wasn't very good. But the thing was, I wasn't good enough yet. And just because someone else can't see the potential in you doesn't mean you don't have it. And at that point, like, I don't think anyone really saw a ton of potential in me. However, I didn't give up somehow. And I'm not sure where that resilience came from, but there was a lot of resilience in me that was like, no. Yes, it was humiliating. And yes, I wanted to give up, but there was something internally that wouldn't let me quit. You know, I knew just over and over again, I kept feeling like this journey isn't done yet. And yes, you're not good enough yet was the important word. And I was willing to work really, really hard in order to become someone that could own a stage on my own, that could dance and play the violin and not sound terribly and not look ridiculous. You know, like, I had a lot of work to do. But I think that was the most valuable lesson I learned from that experience, is just because you're not ready then doesn't mean you'll never be ready. And it doesn't matter if someone else sees it in you or not, if you can see it in yourself.
That is such a powerful lesson. Thank you so much for sharing that. In 2012, you released a self-titled debut album featuring Crystallize, which has had over 200 million YouTube views. And this album reached #1 on the dance electronic charts and classical album. This really helped launch your career.
Yeah, I mean, there was miracles in creating that entire album. And you know, I look back at it and I sometimes can't I honestly think that sometimes when you don't know what you're up against, you don't block the potential, miracles or the potential in yourself. And, you know, when I made that album, I didn't know what normally happened when you make an album. I'd never done it before, and I didn't know how the music industry worked. And I just, I found through a friend recommended a producer that, you know, was willing to work with me. And, you know, he was the only EDM producer in the state of Utah at the time. And somehow I was able to find him through a friend. And, you know, the fact that I did almost the entire album with this one guy. And back then I would pay for the song before we even worked on it. I'd come to him and say, hey, I got another, you know, such and such amount of money. Like, can we make another song? And I'd pay him, and then we would write the song. That's not normally how it works. And so I had to love every song. I mean, nowadays when I make an album, I'll write, you know, 60 songs and 12 of them make the album, you know. On that album, I made 12 songs. All 12 of them were on the album. And that's crazy that they were the first 12 songs I had ever written. I didn't know how to write music. No one ever taught me. But in my head, I believed I could do it. And I really think also divine intervention, you know, helped me. And I mean, looking back at it, I'm like, I cannot believe that happened and that worked. And the fact that album changed my life and ended up taking me literally around the world. You know, I mean, that was huge for me. And so anyways, looking back at it, that's a huge part of my story that makes no sense that it actually worked.
Well, in 2014, you released your second album, Shatter Me, which has a very important message and meaning to you based on your personal struggles with anorexia. Were there any miracles involved in writing that album?
I was terrified to go in and write a second album because my first album, when I wrote it, no one knew who I was. No one was waiting for it. No one expected anything. And I just kind of went in and experimented. And this grand experiment ended up changing my life. And suddenly I went in to write a second album, and I have millions of followers that are excited about it, waiting for it. And I was absolutely terrified, thinking, oh my gosh, it was probably a stroke of luck. Like, I don't know how to write an album. And suddenly I'd learned everything that goes into making an artist and making a successful career and making an album. Now I understood it, and it made me even more terrified of, like, that must have been a stroke of luck because I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't think I can do it again. And I was terrified to go into the studio, but my very first writing session for that, for the Shatter Me album, I went in, worked with a producer, wrote a song, and then I left, and I wasn't sure if it was any good or not. And then a couple of days later, he sent me the song. He waited a few days before he sent it to me so I could re-listen to it. And I was in a hotel room at the time, and as the song played, I put in my headphones and I listened to it back for the first time. I felt this really sweet spirit come over me as I listened to it. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is actually really good. This is a really good song. And the Spirit just spoke to my heart and said, I did not lead you this far to let you fall. And in that moment, I knew that I was going to have help. And that, like, the first album, it wasn't that I was, this amazing, perfect writer out of nowhere. No, I think I had a lot of spiritual inspiration in that first album, and I just became very aware that I was going to be continuously guided. And whenever I got really nervous again and overwhelmed with fear, I would remember that moment in that hotel room by myself with my headphones that I did not lead you this far to let you fall. And and I felt that very inaudibly, those exact words, and I've relied on that promise many times.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. You've been very open about your struggle with depression and anorexia in college. Were there any miracles involved in the turnaround where you were able to love music and love yourself again?
I think the fact that I was able to recover was a miracle in itself. And there's a lot of people that really struggle to beat it. And yes, it's something that I'll struggle with my whole life, but I now have developed the tools where I know how to turn around a downward spiral. I know how to catch it when it's in its infancy and say, I don't deserve to feel this way. And, I feel like I do live a very normal life now, and I'm eons ahead of where I once was when I hated myself and when I hated my body. And now I can, I don't necessarily say I'm happy and I love myself, and that's something I used to not be able to say. And that is a huge miracle, and I think it's one through the miracle of the body that I was given. Our bodies are incredible gifts, and they're gifts from God, and they are each a miracle. And looking at my hands and saying that they're beautiful rather than judging them, and that mindset affects the way that you approach your everyday life. When you're looking at yourself and you're able to feel like you are outwardly beautiful, and be grateful for it. And I think the gift of gratitude helped me, and also just the understanding that I'm a daughter of God, and understanding that my life is a miracle and it's a gift helped me turn around what was a really big downward spiral that had been happening for years that I was completely unaware of. And also I look at it as I really think it was a spiritual prompting that woke me up and finally kind of made me say, oh my gosh, I'm unhealthy, I'm anorexic, I'm depressed, and finally admit it. And I don't think, I'd been in denial for so long, no matter what anybody told me. And I really do think it was the Spirit that spoke to me and let me know, you don't belong in this state. You don't belong to feel this way, and you deserve better. We all deserve better, and no one should have to feel like that. And I don't win the battle every single day, but I would say, like, more times than not, I very successfully win that battle and live a really full, rich life only because of that.
Well, you mentioned there's many tools that you use to help you in that journey. Is there one that you turn to particularly on a daily basis?
It's not anything special or surprising. It's just I now believe that I have a say in how I feel about myself. When I got to a place where I hated myself, like, the brain detects lies and it detects facts, and it says, I don't believe that, and I don't want, because that's not true. And for a while, when I would tell myself I loved myself, it put that in the lie category of my brain. Like, that's not true. I can tell that that's not true. because you don't believe it. But it was this process of slowly training my mind to accept the fact that, no, I am a daughter of God and I love myself and I don't deserve to feel this way. And like, and looking at my body and saying I'm beautiful. Like, all of these things were for a while perceived as lies. And finally my brain started to believe it, and I started to teach my brain that this is true. And so now it's a much easier process. Like it can be in the middle of a day. All of a sudden I'm realizing I'm kind of in a downward spiral today. Like, I don't like the way I'm feeling about myself. I don't like the way I'm looking at myself. And so, all right, we're going to stop this. And whether it's I need to take a moment and meditate or listen to a positive podcast or call my sister, or call my mom, there's all those tools I can turn to of things that I know help me and can reset. And it's the fact that I can reset within minutes and now doesn't take months or a year. Now it's like, okay, I hate the way I'm feeling. I can start over today. And if I still can't quite beat it, I'm going to start over tomorrow.
Oh, that is so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. I also want to talk to you about being on season 25 of Dancing with the Stars. You had a rib injury, but you were still able to dance.
Yes, there were. It was such an amazing experience. Like, I loved being on Dancing with the Stars. I had wanted to do it for years, and I was so excited when it finally all came together and worked out. However, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Like, it was so difficult physically, emotionally, mentally, like in every way. It pushed me to my limit. And, I actually will say, I think one of the most spiritual moments I've ever had was on that show. And I kind of reached a breaking point where I had been working so hard. I was also doubling rehearsals. I was going to dance rehearsals with Mark for like 5 to 6 hours a day. And then I would run to my tour rehearsals where I'd learn choreography with my dancers for my tour that was upcoming. And then we left on tour. And then I was flying across the country, putting shows on every other night, or every night, and then having to fly back to tapings and find time to rehearse during the day. Like, it was exhausting. I've never been that tired and never pushed myself that hard. And that, coming from me, I'm a doer. I'm always pushing myself hard. So for me to finally say I can't do this was really humbling and terrifying. And then, I've injured my rib, and I actually I went to my bishop, who's the leader of the congregation where I go to church, and I basically sat with him and I was crying, and I was like, I don't know how I'm supposed to do all of this. I have taken on way too much, and I'm terrified. I'm going to make a fool of myself in front of millions of people on national TV. And then on top of that, I leave on tour in, a few days, and I'm going to let down thousands of fans that have bought tickets to this sold-out Christmas tour, losing in every category. And on top of that, Bishop, I just got injured, and I don't know what I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm in pain. And then in our church, we can have blessings from a priesthood holder. And so I asked my bishop for a blessing, which is basically like kind of a message from God to me. And he put his hands on my head, and he gave me this beautiful blessing where he promised me that, he said, first of all, that the pain wasn't going to go away, that I would have to endure it, but I would be given the strength to endure it. And then on top of that, my father passed away about a little less than a year before the show started. And I was promised in this blessing that I had angels looking out for me and helping me every step of the way, because they wanted, God wanted me to succeed. And this was something I was supposed to do. And he was going to send angels to help me. And he had already sent angels to help me. And then specifically said, your father has been commissioned to be with you during this time and will be with you every step. And I relied on that promise, and every time I was exhausted and every time I was at my end and I felt like I couldn't go on, I remembered that angels are by my side. And when God is on your team, you can do anything. And so I'd look myself in the mirror and make myself get up and try the routine one more time and try to spin again and practice whatever it was I need to practice. And time after time, miracles would happen where, the first show happened on tour and I was terrified. I was not ready. I didn't know I didn't know if I could remember everything. And suddenly the show happened without a hitch. And same thing when we went to perform on live television. I was so exhausted at the finale, and I pretty much forgot the entire routine. Oh, no. Before I stepped on stage. My mind just went blank, and we're backstage practicing, and Mark, my partner, started freaking out. He's like, "Are you okay?" Like, because I was missing step after step after step as we were rehearsing, and then they called our names to go on stage. And I just about died. I was like, oh no, I've come this far, and I can't believe that I'm probably going to blow it. And we walked onto the stage, and I looked up kind of right before the click started, right before they cut to live TV. I looked up, and I just said a prayer, and I said, I guess, in the long term, this really isn't that important. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to make or break my career. But then I said, you know what? But it matters to me. I've worked really hard, and I've put everything into this, and it's important to me. And so I said a prayer, then just asking Heavenly Father to help me. And I said, and I even called out to my dad to help me. And it was incredible. The click started, the music began, and it was like I went to another place, and the routine just happened, and I was perfect. One, all the hard work paid off, and secondly, I think my angels were guiding my footsteps.
I watched you during the season, and I really think you should have won. You were runner-up, and you were just so unbelievable, so beautiful to watch. I know we have limited time, so I just have a couple questions for you from Nate Farrell that he wanted me to ask you. He wants to know, what made you want to play the violin?
Ooh, I wanted to play the violin when I was 6 years old, actually. I begged my parents for lessons because they used to play these classical records in our house. And, me and my sisters would dance around to these, like the music of Scheherazade and Mozart and, Paganini. And, I remember specifically, though, that the violins were always the, like the fun, fast part. And they also used to take us to orchestra concerts. And so I could see and watch the violinists. And so, yeah, at the age of 6, I just begged for violin lessons.
Next question from Nate. What is your favorite song to play?
One of my favorite songs to play is Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen.
That's one of my favorite songs, too.
Oh, every time I play it, I just feel like, I feel the spirit. And so I think it'll always be one of my favorites.
2 more from Nate. How did you feel once you knew you were famous? I thought that was a funny question coming from Nate, but
yeah, that's an awesome question. It's a weird thing, to all of a sudden realize that people know you, and all of a sudden be like, wow, and they care. They actually care about what I say. Weird. Oh, they care when I say, this is my original song, Crystallize, and they cheer. And you're like, wow, they care. Because for a long time, I was playing gigs where no one cared. I was hired for a wedding, and I would play music and just in the background, or I would be playing at some kind of convention or corporate event that I was hired for, and no one knew who the heck I was. I was just like, oh, there's this interesting violin girl just dancing around. And if I said, this is my song, Crystallize, no one cared. So it was a really interesting experience when all of a sudden I became aware that people get a big smile on their face when I play this song. Wow. Or when I sign this autograph for this person, it means a lot to them. And that was a really powerful moment to realize that, everybody has a voice. Everybody has a sphere of influence. And it made me really aware that I want to use my influence to continuously make people happy. And I think that's a huge gift that I've been given, to be able to make people smile and make people happy. And I don't take it for granted.
When I was in Nashville last month, I was doing a hospital visit, and one of the patients had a shirt on, your shirt, and I told her that I knew you, and her face just lit up, and she's like, Lindsey, she's my favorite violinist. I love her so much. And so I just don't know if you realize the impact that not only your music, but just you as a human being has on so many people, because they recognize that you're real, you're authentic, you truly want to inspire people with what you do, and that's what you're doing. And it was so cool to meet this little girl that loved you so much. Okay, last question from Nate. Where do you see yourself in 20 years?
Ooh, in 20 years? That is such a long time, Nate. Oh my gosh. Because if I think about it, I've only been really doing this. My first tour started a little over 6 years ago. My first ever tour, so I've only been successfully doing this for a little over 6 years, which is insane. to think about how much my life has changed in those 6 years, like flipped upside down dramatically. So gosh, in 20 years, you know what? I hope by then that I have written a Broadway musical and that I'm working on another one.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Yeah, I've always wanted to write a Broadway musical. And so that's, I think in 20 years, that hopefully I've done one and I'm working on a second.
I love that. Well, before I ask the last question, I just want you to tell listeners where they can follow you and see you on tour.
I have all the social medias, just Lindsey Stirling on Instagram, Twitter, all the places. And then lindseysterling.com has all my tour dates on it and all the, fun stuff. We're on tour right now with Evanescence. It's been awesome. Doing a co-headline show, and yeah, I'm loving this tour so much. So I hope to see some of you guys out on the road.
And the tour goes through September 8th?
Yes, goes through September, and then we'll be getting ready for Christmas tour.
And when does that start?
Right after Thanksgiving.
The final question that I ask all of our listeners is, if there were 3 miracles that you could create in the world today, what would that look like for you?
I think the most important one was that people could really, truly love themselves and see themselves for what they're worth. If we could all truly see that, I think a lot of the world's problems would be obliterated. I think they would go away because we'd all have true intentions and we'd all be kind. We would all not feel like we had to do these extreme things in order to feel seen or loved. Second miracle would be, if everyone could have education. And then third, getting water to everyone.
Lindsey, I want to thank you so much for your time today, and I am so excited to see you on Friday. I'm going to be with the Pharrells at your show in Tampa, and we are so excited to see you. But thank you again for all you do to create miracles in the world. And we're so grateful for your support of Children's Miracle Network hospitals, and we look forward to doing a lot more with you in the future.
Awesome. Well, love you guys so much. Thank you for your time. This was amazing.
Hi, I'm Chris Pine. Children's hospitals are amazing places, but they require tremendous resources to care for kids. That's why donations are so important. Put your money where the miracles are. Give to your Children's Miracle Network hospital.